Up world, this is a year in a day, and I'll be joined by Mutale Chewe, and she is someone who everyone needs to get to know, mostly because she's young and she understands what it means to be an ambitious lady. She understands what it means to be a young professional. She understands what it means to be a visionary and someone who believes in herself. So if you're joining in right now, just let me know if you can hear me because we're about to start. So yes, this is where we're at now. As young people, we need to come together. We need to encourage each other to push forward and get the right narrative out there, in as much as we may be, people who are ambitious and people who want to push our own ambitions. We need to also make sure that we're supporting one another. That's the only way to do it. So, one thing that I know that is for sure is we can go very, very far alone. But if we go together, it's easier to get ourselves further, a bit more further. So this is what me and Mutale will be talking about today. You can ask questions as much as you can. So today we'll be talking about the life of a young professional. And for those of you who don't know who she is from Oxford University and she's Zambian. So please get to know her and you can ask anything, that you want to ask in the comment box. So let's go. I'm just waiting for Mutale to join in.
Hi, Malenga.
Hi, Mutale, what's up?
How are you?
I'm great. I'm good. It's good to have you. I know this is
Yeah,
long overdue.
yeah, for
So,
sure.
yeah, it's long overdue. And I know a lot of people are asking me questions saying, is this going to happen? And I'm like, well, we need to create time because we're both busy. And, it's a blessing to just be in one room. But even more so, I think the digital age has brought us together. It's made the world very small. So even if you're in, the UK, even if you're in America, even if you're in South Africa, Namibia, or you're in China, we can still get together and learn from one another.
For sure.
So yeah, so to everyone who's watching, this is Mutale Chewe, and she
Hi.
will introduce she will introduce herself in as briefly as she can, but even more so, she'll tell you a little bit about her journey and the things that she's had to deal with as a young professional, just so that a lot of us can get encouraged and we can continue on the path that we wanna take on. So Mutale, please introduce yourself to people that are watching or watching later.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mutale, as Malenga said. I'm happy to be here. Super nervous because it's the first time I'm ever doing an Instagram live video. But I'm a 2019 Rhodes Scholar from Zambia and a recent MPhil in Economics graduate from the University of Oxford. So my graduation was actually 3 weeks ago exactly. I currently work at the Boston Consulting Group, which is more famously known as BCG. And here I'm an associate consultant in their Johannesburg office. In regards to what I do on a daily basis, I'll speak about this a little bit later, but it just really depends. And it's always interesting trying to explain what like my job actually entails to people because it's so diverse. Yeah, so I think that's a little bit of like where I am. I don't know if you wanted me to delve into like the journey to here, Malenga, or do you have any specific questions?
Yeah. So, being here, obviously, I think to everyone who's watching for the first time, the whole purpose of these Instagram lives are to shine a light on, young professionals, young movers and shakers. They may be Zambian, all around Africans and just, connected at a global level. And one thing that, a lot of people who may be watching for the first time that they may not know is that me and you have actually interacted extensively away from the socials. And one thing that we have in common is purpose, right? Because, for you to get to any stage or for you to get to any level in your life, you need to have a purpose and you need to have a reason why you're doing it. And as we continue to build a very dynamic age, even here in Zambia and in Africa at large, it's very important to also shine the light on people that have had to invest in their education, to invest in their image, in their brand, in their work, and for people to also just get to a point where they can inspire others out there. One thing that I know that is for sure is when I was growing up in Ndola, I always used to look at people in Lusaka that they were better than me, right?
They are.
That's how I that's how I always thought, and that's not true
No, it's
because
not.
but it's not true. But what that did to me is that it made me ambitious. It turned me into a person who's willing to work hard to get to the point where I am today. I haven't even arrived yet, but it's been so good to see people who inspire me, encourage me, and it's also good to see other young people, way younger than me, say, "Yo, look, you're inspiring us, and please let us know how we can be better professionals," right? So, before we get into all the details of why we're here, how, judging by the journey that you've undertaken, Mutale, how would you describe purpose? Why are you doing what you do, and how did you get to that level?
Cool. Sorry, I'm like in a like a library space area in the building I live in, so it's a bit noisy. But I think first and foremost, I would just like bluntly say this, like I'm Christian first, and so I sort of view the world through that lens. And for me, in terms of purpose, ultimately, the essence of life dwells in our relationship with God, and everything else that, like for me in my life, that I see, like for example, my academic achievements and the ability to work in like big organizations is a manifestation of my actual relationship with God. And so for me, purpose lies in just like me walking with God on a daily basis. But then in terms of like my drive, I'm also motivated by the fact that I come from Zambia, and growing up in Zambia, I questioned why, for example, you have lots of people with amazing ideas, but they don't have access to capital, or like you have businesses that are trying to establish themselves, but then simply because of the volatile economic environment, they're not able to thrive. And so for me, I believe that there's like one thing that I enjoy doing is that I like to connect things and people and processes. And so my ultimate goal on this earth, which is a manifestation of my purpose, which is working with God, is to be able to, play a part in scaling up big business on the African continent as a whole.
Yeah, yeah. And one thing that I appreciate about what you've said is the fact that you haven't strayed away from the faith. And one thing that I am fighting every day when I wake up is to always stay faithful to the things that made me stay faithful from the beginning. Even before I got my first salary, even before I got my first suit, my first shoes, it's very easy to stray away from that because you start to get successful. People start to notice you. People start to praise you. And sometimes you can get away from that faith. And I'm very aware that there may be people who are watching who may not be of the faith, or they believe in a different faith. And we respect that. And
Yeah.
one thing that I would just say is to get to where we're supposed to be as youths or as young professionals, there should be a cause that we're fighting for. And for people like you and I, the faith is very much a part of our purpose. And that is why we push ahead, because we realize that our giftings and our opportunities are not only for us, they're also for those people that are watching us, so we can be a blessing to them as well. So, you've had a very interesting journey because you were at Oxford University, and I'm sure there are people who, when they sit down, they're thinking, how do you get into Oxford? Like, how would you even imagine yourself being at Oxford? And fun fact, I had bumped into one, I think, old friend of yours back from your school, I think in high school, who was singing praises about you. And he was like, Mutale was aspiring to be at Oxford. Even when we were in high school, she was always pushing for exams and pushing herself, and she was always a hard worker. So my question is, did you always want what you're doing now? And how was the whole journey of your life through Oxford University? And how can that be an encouragement to a young kid watching right now to say, don't give up on your dreams. keep on pushing and you can also get to these heights?
So just to give a bit of context, so I grew up in an entrepreneur's household, and ultimately I always wanted to be like affiliated to some form of business, right? And so that was always my motivator, even in school. And by the grace of God, I was more acquainted with the academic side of life. And I remember this one time I was in grade 4, so I was at Nkwazi for primary school, and I passed number 4. So like you pass numbers, and then like number 1 is like the ultimate goal. And so this one time I passed number 4, and it was because I was watching too many cartoons. And my grandmother, my dad's mom, basically like sat me down, and she was just like, "This is not the standard. You need to do better." And I think from that point onwards, I stopped watching TV. And I only watched TV, I think, when I was 20, like the last, like from the time I was probably 9 up until I was 20. I did not watch TV because of that, because I was like, it's a distraction. But yeah, so basically, I've been more academically acquainted, and through that academic journey, I really wanted to study at what I would consider the best of the best in, like, the academic sort of institutions. And so Oxford was a target. And, for my undergraduate studies, I studied in the UK. I didn't study at Oxford. And it's really funny because initially I was meant to go to another university, but I interned at a local franchise in Zambia, and I realized that maybe studying business management won't help me help businesses, and maybe economics will help me understand how I can contribute to either through policy or through like finance, to creating a better environment for businesses, and hence the tilt towards economics. But just to say that sometimes the path isn't linear, and initially my goal was always to hit those, like the Kings and the Cambridges and the Oxfords of the world, but it didn't happen immediately. But it's not to say that you should stop trying. Like, you should always keep knocking on that door, because eventually it will open if you're determined enough.
Yeah, I love that very much. And you're an inspiration to me as well in a lot of ways, because there's so many aspirations that I have as a young professional. But as much as we aspire to get to all these top positions, there's also the aspect of getting through school. And if you can, and if you've been blessed with the privilege to, or you work hard enough, you can also aim higher for top universities as well. But just on the same theme, and keeping the same context of of the questions, what what is the greatest lesson that you've learned from university up to this time now, where you're a hardworking young woman, and obviously this is pretty much still a very male dominated society, right? But we're not going to get into the controversy of that. But how has the journey been? Just what's the greatest lesson so far, stepping out of university and then going into the real world, and now you have to like practically just, you're on your own. Mom can hold your hand to cross the road anymore. You're just basically by yourself. So how what's the greatest lesson stepping into society after all these experiences that you've had?
I think one key like lesson I've learned throughout like the past few years is keep asking questions, and keep probing the people around you and leveraging from other people's knowledge and expertise. Because I feel like, especially for me as an academic person, right, like I like to study and be thorough and go through things, but like you won't be able to do that at every juncture of your life. If you do that,
Yeah.
then you'll be an inefficient person. But then what you can do is you can go for a networking event and speak to like a CEO of a bank and learn from him. And you even learn much more than what you would have learned in a money and banking module at university. Or like you can reach out to somebody on LinkedIn who is working in a field that interests you, and you have a coffee, and in that 30 minutes you would have probably learned something more like tangible and applicable to the real world than you would have learned in on an online course in, let's say, Python or some form of programming. But it's just to say that you should keep on asking questions, and you should never be afraid to ask questions, because I think the biggest misconception we have as we transition into the real world is that we need to know everything because we've been through school. But it's just like, school is great, and you do learn a lot from school, especially in certain fields, like, if you're a doctor, a lawyer, like, it's almost directly applicable. But in other vocations, like, I studied economics. Now I'm working as a generalist, and I don't run regressions on a day-to-day basis. Like, what I learned in university is almost like non-applicable. But what I do learn is from, like, speaking to, like, people who've been at the organization longer than I have, or like, grabbing a coffee with a partner and just learning and leveraging off of his experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that very much, because I feel like that's an aspect of life that we normally don't like to discuss, because you don't want to make others feel like going to university is useless. But and it's very true, because even I sometimes, some of the statistics, the formulas that we did in uni, I don't use them now.
Yeah.
What I use now are more of my networking skills, my character, my outgoing nature, being very social. It's a gift as well, because the company will look at me and they're like, who can we send to this event who is going to bring us money? All right, we're going to pick Mulenga because he's very good at running his mouth, right? But so as you move up, in your career, you start to realize that your gifting is also very vital to your career progression, because in as much as you have all the master's degrees and the PhDs, your gift is still very valid, right? And that is where the aspect of faith comes in, because you nurture that gift in the faith as you grow older. So if you're good at bringing people together, it's a skill set that amplifies in the company, because then they'll be like, oh, okay, so this person is good at mathematics, but they're also good at bringing people together. So we're going to put them in, human resource or whatever, according to what your strengths are. But basically, one thing that I also just love to encourage young people is, don't be so closed-minded. Like, be open-minded to the fact that, you go to school to do accounts, economics, and medicine and engineering, but also don't neglect your other strengths that come with you as an individual, because that's where the money, the purpose, and the fulfillment can come from. So now that we're also talking about the professional side of things, what do you feel like being a hardworking young professional means to you? Especially now, you can answer it as briefly as you can, feel free. What does being a young hardworking professional mean to you? Because reward is something that motivates a lot of young people. We all want to get paid high salaries, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? But what's the value addition you get from being a hardworking young professional in your field?
So, like, I always joke about this. It's like, I'm really attracted to jobs that, like, working long hours is not really an option, because you have a meeting at 21 and it's just like, I can't miss this meeting or else I get fired. So it's just, it's a function of, like, the nature of the type of jobs I've been attracted to, particularly outside of Zambia. I mean, like, in Zambia, I've interned at several places, and the hours have been a lot more sane in comparison to, let's say, the places I've interned and worked at in the UK and now South Africa. But I think, for me personally, I recognize that I don't know a lot of things, right? And again, it's a function of, all our lives we're told we go to school, do well in school, and then come out of school and you will succeed because you have done well in school. But that's not automatic, right? Because in the real world, like, the skill set and, the things that you need to do on a day-to-day basis, 9 out of 10 would sort of be different from what you've learned in an academic setting. And so for me, it's like recognizing and being humble enough to the fact that I don't know a lot of things, and the best time to learn is now, so that I can hopefully one day, by the grace of God, not have to work until like midnight. So, like, that's been, like, at the back of my mind. But then also a huge part of it, like you said, it goes back to purpose, and just recognizing that in every season and part of our life, there's always you know, a purpose behind it. And like right now, it's like I want to learn as much as I can about businesses, about business in Africa, and how you can scale up big businesses in Africa. And so I recognize that in order to do so, I have to attend or like, you know, be in an organization that requires me to work, you know, late nights. And the hard work, like the hardworking element or the requirement that comes with, you know, those long hours, which is hard work, is something that is much easier for me to come to terms with.
Yeah.
And it's not so much of a task, and it's something I actually want to do.
Mhm. Yeah. So now that we have established, obviously, the origins of any young professional's career, which is starting with purpose and then transitioning into university and recognizing what you have to do there and maximizing that opportunity, and then transitioning into society, getting your first job, your first salary, and the value that you have to get, you know, throughout those stages. Now we graduate to work-life balance. Obviously, your whole your whole life cannot be about work, and even if it is, there's still some balance you need to have. So how is that being managed in your life? Because I also understand there may be people who just got their first jobs last year, and they may be thinking, oh my goodness, I need to ask these guys who are young and they've been working for the last 5 years or 3 years how they manage their work-life balance and social life balance. And I think that's a very relevant one, especially in a world where mental health is also very vital. So how do you manage that, knowing that you're also a very hardworking person?
Um, Before I answer this question, I just also want to just go back to say, or like just to put a disclaimer out there, school is important. It's not useless. You do learn a lot. Like it's more about the skill set versus the actual content, and the skill set allows you to thrive in the workplace. I just want to like outrightly say this before
Yeah.
moving on to the, you know, mental health aspect and, you know, work-life balance. Honestly, in my life, it's still a work in progress. I'm still learning how to define guardrails. And I think, you know, I was on leave for 2 weeks and I recently got back to work. And these past 2 weeks, I've been a lot more intentional about, you know, defining boundaries at work. So I think it's recognizing, first of all, that um, your well-being is so important, and your health can't be bought back, right? Yes, getting a salary or having a nice job is amazing, but it's important to just take care of yourself. And so for me, like I've got KPIs, like yes, I'm willing to grind and push, but then there's certain things that if I don't like have them ticked off, Mutale is not going to function. And for me, one of these KPIs is like having 7 hours of sleep, not working at all during weekends. And so I think, you know, you have to recognize, especially in the like the formative, and I'm still in the formative part of my career, you need to recognize that you don't know a lot of things. You need to put in the work and the hours. But then at the same time, you also need to take care of yourself, and what your KPIs, you know, look like will differ. You know, some people are more sporty, and so like they need to do squash or tennis like 3 times a week. And maybe that means like, for example, in a BCG context, you know, flagging to your project leader that I have to, you know, go for squash on Wednesdays and Thursdays. So I will be offline between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. But then I'm happy to push an extra hour, or like no meetings should be scheduled during that time because this is really important to me. So I think again, it goes back to like using your voice and, you know, looking at your KPIs and um, leveraging, I mean, using your voice to define your KPIs.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. And I think it's something that goes by unnoticed most times, because sometimes we, as young people, love to burn ourselves out. You know, sometimes you just want to finish, you know, and I'm a culprit at this. Sometimes I'm given a raw at work and the timeline is 7 days, but I'm that guy who wants to do it in 3 days. And I always have people saying, guy, like, just
Calm down.
take it easy. Your job is still here. But such is the life of a young professional, and this is the reason why we're doing this live. And
Yeah.
we'll be coming to a close. You know, it's not a long live session. I just felt like it was necessary, you know, to have Mutale come through because, like I said, we have there's a a new hope burning right now in a lot of young people across Africa and across, you know, different countries. where we are starting to break a lot of stereotypes and boundaries. And as a result, it's also giving us an opportunity to dine with people that are way older than us, but they're also willing to learn from how we do things. I'm doing a study right now, which is, it's a controversial study, but I just felt like I want to share my thoughts on it, and it's called Gen Zs Will Make Better Professionals, right? And the reason, right, and it's my opinion, right? And I'm sure people will comment on it. But the reason why I'm doing a write-up like that is because I've started to understand that we have been blessed as this generation to be born in a time where we can talk about mental health freely. We can express our faith freely. Some, way back in the day, you can't do some of these things we're able to do that we get away with, right? We're able to travel, right? We're able to break boundaries that our parents were not. Even people like me, having, being able to travel out there, that's something that I know for sure some family members couldn't do, but I've been blessed with that opportunity. And therefore I have to be an inspiration from my family first, and then to people outside of my circle. So in closing, as we start to, obviously get to the close of this live, because obviously you have to get back to your program and enjoying your weekend. What are some of the nuggets? They may be nuggets of wisdom and nuggets of professional comfortability that you would like to share to both young women, young men alike, who are just starting out their careers, or they're still in uni. If you're writing a book right now, Mutale, what are some of those nuggets you would share freely and say, guys, let me tell you something. I know no one has ever told you this, but I'm going to tell it to you. So what are some of those things?
So I'll go back to my first one. Always ask questions. So I was like renowned for asking questions, both in my undergrad and master's degree. Like one professor literally told me that if there was an award I would get, it would be like the queen of asking questions. Like if you wrote like something that looked like an S on the board, I would question, is that an S or a five? Like I was that type of person, simply because it's like, if I don't know, I don't know. And so I want to know. And I'm not ashamed to not know, because I can't know everything. So yeah, just ask questions. The second thing I would say is, sometimes, especially in this day and age, I mean, you go on LinkedIn, you go on Facebook, you go on Instagram, you see people posting updates, and you think that everyone has it made. But then there's underlying struggles, and there's a journey behind that post. So it's just recognizing that you have your own journey, and just like keeping your head down. The third thing I would say is, again, I'm an academic person, and it's so easy to think that that's enough, but it's really not. So challenge yourself in university, right? If you're in university, especially, challenge yourself, do extracurricular activities, and just don't just do them for the sake of like, oh, I want to just tick a box, but do stuff that you actually enjoy doing, because it will enable you to add value. And if you want to be an exceptional person, and get into places like Oxford, or get into top tier organizations, you need to show that zeal and drive, and you need to show that you've made an impact within your university career, and you can't fake passion or zeal. And so it's really important to do something that means a lot to you. So I think those are the three main nuggets I have to share.
Yeah. So are we free to ask that you are doing what you've always wanted? Would you say to this point you are, well, I don't know. It's an argument, but would you say you get some fulfillment from doing what you do? Are you happy with the skill sets that you're able to provide even to the company, so much that it's bringing you that value that you would also, be of impact into society, right?
Um, Yes, so I feel like I'm doing what I meant to do to get me
Yeah.
to my end goal. I
Yeah.
never envisaged myself ever working in management consulting. Truth be told, I applied for this job as insurance because I really just wanted to work at Goldman Sachs as an economist, which I did for 6 months and quit. But like that was my end goal. But and that was like my desire, like my utmost desire. But you know, along the path or the journey, that changed, right? And so I found myself here, and I never thought of it 2 years ago, but it's helping me fulfill, like, you know, what I believe I should do in the long term. So I would say like it's helping me achieve that end goal, and I'm happy with where I'm at, and I'm enjoying, you know, the work I do, the people, like the people I'm exposed to, and the skill set that I'm developing.
Yeah. Well, that is so amazing, Mutale. I've been, so blessed to have you on this Instagram live, and like I said, it's something that's been long overdue. I know we haven't touched on a lot of things, but I just felt like as briefly as we can be an example to our friends as well. Because I was just saying before the live started to say we can do so much alone, given the circumstances. I think we can do so much alone by ourselves. I mean, we've gotten this far, but it would be amazing to also just do things together as a team or as a group, as brothers, as sisters, as friends, and whatever, colleagues. It will be really interesting to see where we end up as a country, as a continent, as well as just as people in general. Because I mean, right now we're experiencing what I would say the first of its kind situations. I mean, at a global level, economically, socially, even climate wise, right? We're experiencing a first of its kind, and it's a very unusual environment. And there's no better time than right now to get together as young people. So, closing remarks for me are that I am so happy, with the journey that you're on. And like I said, you inspire me, and I'm sure you inspire a lot of other people out there. And, my wish and my prayer and my hope is that going forward, there'll also be other people who will look at your journey and be like, you know what, I can push, and I can push even further. Because that's the whole reason of why purpose is supposed to be passed on to people, right? So
Yeah.
I'm so happy that you spared some time, to just be here with us and share your nuggets. I have a question, and before we go, I'll feel so bad if we don't tackle it. Sorry, Mutale, before you go, just a few
No
minutes.
worries.
Someone is asking, so is it possible? Someone is saying, is it possible to be a Rhodes Scholar? What's the process of being a Rhodes Scholar and obviously getting to Oxford University? I hope you don't feel like you have to share everything extensively, but just briefly, how possible is it for someone to be a Rhodes Scholar?
Well, you're talking to someone who applied 2 weeks before the deadline and never considered it prior, so it's very possible. Um, it's very, very possible. It's really funny. So in 2017, like for me, Oxford was always the end goal. Like I was like, I'm going to go to Oxford at some juncture in my life. So I went down to Oxford with one of my closest friends, and basically we went to see the department that I was looking to apply for, which is the Department of Economics. And we were walking down Oxford, and we passed by Rhodes House, which is where like the office for the Rhodes Scholarship is in Oxford. And
Yeah.
it's a really pretty building. So we walked in, and I was just looking around, and I was like, oh, this is nice. And then we just walked out. Like I never really thought much of it, because I was just like, this can't be me.
Wow.
Like I never saw myself there, like as a Rhodes Scholar. And it's really amazing how, I completed my final year of university, which was in June 2018. And then I had a very intense internship at JP Morgan in their London office. And I was meant to start my master's in September of that year, but I was completely burnt out. So I went home and took a gap year. And then somebody who was a few grades ahead of me, in high school and primary school, reached out to me. He was a 2018 Rhodes Scholar, and he was like, "Did you ever consider applying for Rhodes?" And I was just like, "I don't think so. Like, they'll accept me." And he really pushed me. Like he like made it a point that you should apply. You must apply. And I had to gather like 6 references within 10 days and write a personal statement, and it was a lot. But I think, from that journey, I recognized that, you know, being someone or achieving something isn't you submitting an application. Because, there was a networking event before the interview, and there were a bunch of people who were in the room with me, and they were telling me about how they've been, preparing for this application a year in advance. And I was so jittery, because I was just like, yo, I really didn't think about this until like a few days before the deadline. So it's just like, I definitely won't get this. But then after I won the scholarship, I recognized that um, achieving that milestone wasn't a function of the application itself, but it was the experiences that I had, you know, throughout my university career and even before then, you know, making sure that you're faithful in the little, because that will show up in an application. It doesn't matter whether you've prepped an application in and out. If you just don't have it, you don't have it, because you haven't switched to develop yourself outside of the classroom, or like just develop yourself at all. But by the grace of God, had the opportunity to do that, and it reflected in my application, and I got the scholarship. So very much possible, but just make sure that you're building yourself in the moment, and you don't think it's an overnight type of achievement, or like
Yeah.
it's application based. It's a journey.
Yeah. And okay, cool. Thank you so much for that one. And are there any stuff that you're doing outside of your work to pour into society, or is it something you're growing into? Are you being a little bit more social and, maybe mentoring young ladies, or I don't know, just contributing something outside of your professional space? Are there any things you're targeting?
So it's really funny. So up until last year, like I've always done like 10 different things. And then I went into the marketplace and I was just like, I feel like very overwhelmed. I don't know a lot of things, and I'm just like, okay, let me keep my head down. But then in like my spare time, I do like help people like with CVs, cover letters, scholarship interviews, job interviews. And something I'm really passionate about. In 2019, a close friend of mine and I founded this platform called the Inside Analyst, and effectively we were just going through people's CVs to be able to help them have a one pager, because in finance, or in like London, which is called the city, you need these one pager CVs that like are really hard to structure. And so we thought that if we were able to get our foot in the door simply because we knew how to rearrange a CV, like there's a lot of more brilliant people who just don't know how to rearrange a CV. And so that's an initiative we took. And we were thinking of resurrecting it this year, but then I was just like, hold on, like let me first just like find my rhythm and balance. But then I do also mentor via a platform called the Student's Friend, which is run by my closest friend. I will share the link with you, Malenga, and I don't know how you'll disseminate it, but it's like
Yeah.
a platform that she's created with mentors across the African continent, because she's Nigerian, across different fields, from the creative space to science to economics, academia, corporate. And so I would really encourage people to like sign up onto that, because there's a lot of like amazing other young Africans who are still figuring things out just like I am, but have
Yeah.
been able to get their foot in the door and are willing to share the knowledge that enabled them to be able to do so.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much, Mutale. I think we're going to come to a close now. Please, Mutale, let's do this again when you're free. We're going to wait until you get into your rhythm. We can do this even next year, but it's just, such a blessing to see a Zambian, a fellow Zambian who's young as well and passionate, purposeful, big on faith and big on people as well, to just get out here and encourage people out there. So if you're watching this, and you're young and you're passionate about something, just know that it is very possible to get to where you're supposed to be. She's an example of it. I may also be an example to other people. And this is also a sign that we can still do things together, even if we're separated by borders or by, geographical locations. There's still inspiration to draw from one another. So I'll see you guys next week when we have another guest, and please, for those of you who may want to know more about Mutale's journey, you can follow her, and as she continues to elevate, she will be able to send, and share her success. But even more so, we should continue to support our own and always encourage them when we see them. So, Mutale, thank you so much. I'll talk to
Thank
you on the
you.
other side. Thank you so much for sparing time.
No worries. Thank you, Malenga. Bye.
All right. Bye
Bye, everyone.
bye.